Alrighty everyone, welcome back. It is now September 12th of 2023, and we know that Disney are embracing a couple of box office failures to arrive, not just this year, but also for next, such as The Marvels and Snow White 2024 being the biggest ones of all, both for the MCU and their Disney live-action remakes. Now, on top of that, we know that Bob Iger and the board have been in this constant shakeup based on budgeting limitations and how they're setting that for specific franchises out there like Star Wars, Marvel, etc., and why that's been creating a lot of complications behind the scenes. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. And let's get right into what's going on here with Peter Dinklage and his connections to Snow White and why there's been a lot of ongoing drama between himself, Disney, and even the Snow White director Marc Webb. Now, we talked about something related to this lightly a couple of days ago, about how Peter Dinklage is having growing issues with how Disney has been treating Rachel Zegler, and how essentially a lot of her scenes are getting cut and rearranged, but we'll have more to talk about that in just a second. We also know that Dinklage, before they even began filming, he wanted to actually have a role as one of the 7 dwarfs, back when Disney was going to do that accurately, and they denied him, because they wanted to embrace more unknown actors that actually had dwarfism to kind of give them jobs, to give them roles, right, to give them a chance, and he had an issue with that. We talked about that as well. Now, this is where things get even, I feel, all the more worse, is that with Snow White 24 going through much damage control by Disney, one major development has to do with actor Peter Dinklage and the production of Snow White. Now, one big development involves how Peter Dinklage is reportedly very offended over what Snow White director Marc Webb did during his re-edits of the film by drastically reducing the number of scenes involving Rachel Zegler singing as Snow White. These were orders given out by Disney higher-ups, mind you, down to Marc Webb. However, Webb was given the liberty to rearrange the film through his own vision, something that Zegler reportedly had very strong negative opinions about that rattled so largely throughout Disney that it reached Peter Dinklage, who is now a very close and dear friend of Zegler, from working with her on the Hunger Games prequel, out this, of course, fall. Tensions are growing between Dinklage and Marc Webb to the point that Dinklage is already preparing to make statements against Snow White director Marc Webb once the SAG strike comes to a close and everything with WGA to a close. This is all to defend Rachel Zegler and how he views this as a way to mistreat her, both as an actress and as a performer. Now guys, let me just stop here. Now, the thing that Dinklage really seems to have a growing grudge with Disney for, and why he still seems to have an issue with them, has a lot to do with the fact that, we talked about this too, they dropped a lot of Marvel roles for him. He was supposed to be in Marvel projects beyond Infinity War, and a lot of those were cancelled, a lot of those were removed, because of his growing issues with Disney after he raised his voice against them, and after he was denied to get cast in Snow White 2024, back when there were not the 7 magical creatures. Alright, this dates back well before March of 2022. The other fact here that I think is even all the more revealing is the fact that we also have how Dinklage and Zegler are now very close, very good friends. You see this very common in Hollywood, where cast members get very close and become best friends, or stay in touch with each other and defend each other through troubling times, right? And Dinklage is reportedly very angry over the fact of how there are re-edits taking place for this movie that's wreaking havoc on Rachel Zegler's performance. And the reason why he has an issue with this is that he, in case you guys did not know, actually worked with her closely on her scenes where she plays guitar and she sings in Hunger Games, stuff like that, and you'll hear more about this by this November. Now, moving onwards, this is where the situation gets even more serious, because we know that Dinklage has a lot of problems with the 7 magical creatures, and not the characters per se, but the actors, and how they are being treated by Disney. And this is where complications, I feel, get even worse. Let's get into it. So, on top of that, DINKLAGE is reportedly also unhappy with how Webb is treating the 7 magical creatures as well as Disney in the upcoming Snow White film, where they are not allowed to reveal themselves on late night television, even in a lot of interviews when the strikes come to a close. Peter is offended by Disney over this recent decision by Disney to exclude the actors as the magical creatures to remain in hiding during the promotional phase of Snow White, and DINKLAGE is also preparing to make a statement about this concern as well once the strike comes to an end. This comes after Rachel Zegler ended up making this known to her cast members of the Hunger Games, to the point that the drama has been rattling throughout all of Hollywood behind the scenes, and that DINKLAGE is now prepared to become Rachel's voice once the strike ends officially. So here's the other problem. The fact that DINKLAGE feels like he has the audacity to serve as a voice against how Disney's treating Snow White, I think it all just roots back to the fact that they refused to give him a role, and he's very much holding that grudge, and that's why he's so defensive. Had he had gotten a role for Snow White, I don't think he would be quite as defensive right now, what's going on, and how he's already preparing these direct statements against Marc, Webb, and Disney. But due to the strikes, he can't talk about anything right now. That's why it's all in preparation and why he's preparing to make that happen. The other problem here is the fact that you have Zegler and DINKLAGE starring in the same exact movie, such as the Hunger Games prequel, and that's why they're so very close. That's why Zegler is essentially, from what it sounds like, using him as a voice, and using him to speak up for herself, because I guess she figures when the time comes, when she can talk more, people aren't going to have it. People are not going to have it for Zegler. She probably feels like, let's have somebody else that's more known speak for me, and maybe that'll be more, accepted. Where in reality, I feel like it's going to be quite the opposite of the effect that's intended. I think a lot of people are going to turn on DINKLAGE because of this. I think that a lot of people are going to be turned off by Peter once he begins to speak up for Rachel Zegler and everything around that like. So, again, in a way, the strikes may very well reduce the backlash, because if they stay before the film even releases, they won't have people like DINKLAGE saying what they have to say before the film even arrives. But after the film arrives is also another story, because people are still going to be talking about this, people are going to still remember this movie for the end of time. Once it drops, that's how bad this movie reportedly really is, that it may very well be Disney's worst movie of all time, and that just goes to show you what DINKLAGE is all about. So anyway, guys, drop a comment below, fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.
Night to move.